Today's podcast is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast, providing podcasters with a flat rate for ad space so you always know how much you get when you include an ad from Podgo. I recently joined as a member, and you can too. Apply today to become a member and immediately be connected with advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co at podgo.co. And when you go to apply and they ask you, how did you hear about Podgo? Make sure you tell them that the Vault Classic Music Review sent you.
Welcome to the Vault Podcast, Classic Music Reviews, presented by IV Creative. Now, here's your hosts, B. Cox and the crew.
Greetings and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Vault Podcast, Classic Music Reviews, presented by IV Creative. It's a perspective of the classics from a fresh point of view. We appreciate you for taking your time and lending your ears to our perspective. You could be anywhere listening to anything, but you're right here with us, so we thank you. With you today is yours truly, B. Cox, and today we have a bit of a special segment and special guest. Welcoming back once again to the Vault Classic Music Reviews. I sat down recently with very good friends of the show, none other than Kahlil, Wonda, and Agard of the Reggae Lover podcast. One of my favorite pods out there. Obviously, those of y'all who are longtime listeners of the show listened last year as Kahlil and I chopped it up over a guest lounge episode, and then also did a review last year of Capleton's More Fire and also Buju Banton's Till Shiloh. Well, I'm working on them both back again this year, and we got a good review coming up. Another reggae album, something that is turning 30 years old this year. So I wanted to make sure that I had my guys in the building. Shout out to them and all of their fans, and of course all the work they put in for reggae music and culture as always. So I sat down with them to talk about this album, and here's how the conversation went. And joining us here with the Vault Classic Music Reviews podcast, some brethren of mine. Had to make sure that if I was going to do an album like this today, I wanted to make sure that I brought them on because they're the experts. And of course, I'm talking about none other than Kahlil, Wonda, and Agard of the Reggae Lover podcast, worldwide, the authorities, I say, on reggae and exclusively, especially on sound clash culture here on the internet. We linked up last year. I was on their show last year. They did a feature segment. Kahlil and I did a couple of reviews last year. We also did a guest lounge. So I wanted to make sure that when I had them on for this review that we got together and we linked up, man. Fellas, how are y'all?
Good. Real good today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having us on once again. I can't believe it's been like over a year.
Yeah, man. Yeah, Kahlil, I remember when we did our guest lounge last year, we were doing it right around the same time. Matter of fact, I think it was on the same day of Beanie and Bounty Killer's versus, what I'm saying? So it's literally been like about a year since the first time we linked up, you know what I'm saying? Y'all have definitely done some great things on the Reggae Lover podcast. For those of y'all who were listening, Kahlil and Agard actually just wrapped up their latest season here on Reggae Lover. If you haven't subscribed to the Reggae Lover podcast and consider yourself a lover of reggae music and culture, please make sure you go check it out. They do an excellent job of covering everything of things of what are going on in the industry. They have great interviews, great insight overall. And for those of y'all who were not familiar with sound clash culture, as I was not too familiar with it, I definitely found it not only informative, but also entertaining as well. So thanks y'all again for coming on. Glad to have y'all on. And of course, we're here. It's what we do here on the Vault. We do classic albums. What we have here in front of us today is going back 30 years. And going back 30 years to an album that really, to me, I think, helped to shift the attitude towards dancehall music and reggae music for the better part of this last 30 years. And we're talking about none other than Shabba Ranks, the Emperor, as raw as ever, 30 years ago, released on May 21st, 1991 on Epic Records. Runtime of 44 minutes and 35 seconds. Producers on here, you know them well. Steely and Clevie, of course, but most notably, and listening to this last year and reading about this, but the late, great Bobby Digital, also a producer on this as well. KRS-One doing production on this as well. He featured on a track here with Shabba the Jam. 12 tracks, 44 minutes, 30 years later. of Shabba as raw as ever. And I definitely wanted to make sure that I got you, Kahlil, and Agard on here to talk about this album. I was very young. I was only about 9 or 10 years old when this album came out. I remember it distinctly, though, because my sisters were really, really big fans of reggae, and my cousins were big fans of dancehall reggae. And as we talked before, my family in Grenada, we were definitely more into, my parents were more into soca and calypso and the old school reggae, but not really too much into dancehall. I wanted to sort of bring you all on to get your perspective, considering, your subject matter and you all being, as I like to say, experts on the culture. And just to, sort of preface before I get to you all, at that time, dancehall really wasn't a big thing in the U.S. at that time. And as far as commercially, it wasn't something that that radio program directors were looking to put on the radio that would get spins and people would request because they didn't think that nobody was checking for it. It was a very small audience, so they thought. So I really thought this went a long way in changing the conversation. So I just wanted to get your opinions and when you first heard this album, around that time, where you were, and then when you listened to it, what you thought about it. And, obviously this wasn't Shabba's first album, but it was really the first one that he broke out outside of really the dancehall culture in Jamaica and really making waves, especially in the United States with this. So I'll take either one of y'all, just your opinions on thinking back to when that album first came out, what you thought.
Kahlil, you want to go first or you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first. Because you were here, for it.
Yeah, man. So I listened to this album this week again. And first of all, my first, I guess, experience with this album wasn't necessarily as an album. So this time I was living in Brooklyn. I was young, preteen, as you were. I just remember distinctly the sounds of like Volvos, Maximas, Toyota Cressidas, with the equalizers and the crossovers in the system, like real crystal clear sound systems that used to be in cars, like not the rattling stuff, like just deep, smooth bass. And every car seemed to be playing Shabba. Particularly, the first song, Trailer Load of Girls, I just remember hearing some of these tracks on the radio, and later on, I did get the cassette, but I just remember just the feeling in Brooklyn. It was like summertime, everybody was playing, the bass was pumping, and yeah, like you said, it was a sort of a revolutionary album. And the crazy thing for me is growing up in New York, Shabba was such a presence that it's only later on that I realized that the rest of the country wasn't really into reggae like that, because, growing up in the Caribbean community, it was all about Shabba, Ninja Man. Around this time, this is when, Mad Cobra was coming out, so yeah, man, this is a good time. And I definitely remember just the feeling of summer when I listened to this album.
Yes. Yeah. I think I have similar feelings as well. Describing the vehicles, the Maximas,
that was the main thing.
The Cressidas. Like my sister had a '91 Civic. You know what I'm saying? Like one of the first models they had out, and she had the Pioneer speakers in the back. And like you said, just that, not the rattling bass, but the just clear, crisp, deep bass sound. Like that's what I remember a lot as well, man. So, Kahlil, what about you?
Okay, so for me, 1990 is the year that I, came to Brooklyn from Kingston. I didn't have this album at all, so I can't say that, I was rocking the album, as it's presented. But I do remember, like Agard was saying, the presence, like the effect that Shabba had. So some of my memories, of course, the Trailer Loader Girls, that's just one of the biggest songs of the time. It's still one of the biggest songs, super popular song. And so I just remember hearing that, like, that was definitely one of the soundtrack, songs. That's one of the anthems of that era, for real. That song just stands out as being, like, a very timeless, it was like kind of a little bit more modern than the rest of the album, in my opinion, somehow, although it's still like rooted in that 90s dancehall vibe. So, you know what I mean? Like it's not an 80s song. It's quintessentially a 90s dancehall song. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that kind of stamps that album, just that first single for me. And then of course, the Maxi Priest and Shabba, is another one, which we'll get to that one.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, no, definitely. My memories on this, as I stated, and I was growing up in the DC area, that we had a sizable West Indian population here. So we were sort of on to us, especially the Caribbean community, were on to a lot of the reggae and dancehall hits before it really got to the public. Of course, most of us had sort of known about Shabba, my older sisters and them, but I really finding out about Shabba really in depth was really like the two of you all, Trailer Load of Girls, in the video specifically. It really to me was something how I knew that it was different when I saw the way not how like my peers and my sisters and their peers reacted to it, was the way that how our parents reacted to it. Because, like I said, my parents were used to a certain type of reggae, and this reggae, they were not rocking with it, but what I did notice is that it wasn't just us in the Caribbean community really rocking with it. It was the American folks too that were rocking with it too. Like I remember, even back then, as little as I was, I remember it was one guy sort of hanging out with my sisters and her friends, and he was like, "Yo, I don't know, what the hell what this dude Shabba be saying. Whatever he's saying though, I rock with it, And that was really the mentality a lot of Americans had when listening to reggae. They didn't necessarily understand everything what was being said, but the rhythms, though, was what caught them, and the vibe and everything was what caught them. So you sort of roll into this, and to me, I started noticing that after this album came out, you started hearing more reggae on the radio, and that was my primary source of being able to listen to music. And then after you hear Shabba, then you start seeing more cats come out, like you were saying, Agard, seeing the Mad Cobras, and eventually seeing Buju start to emerge on the scene. You start seeing cats like Shaggy. The next thing you know, you're seeing Shaka Demus and Pliers, and then Don Penn. All these reggae hits are starting to cross over and into the American mainstream. So that's really why my memories was the fact that it kind of really started to jumpstart this reggae and dance hall sort of infusion into the American culture. And now a lot of people sort of really adapted to it. My other part, I guess, my reactions to it is that this was really, I think, the first time that a lot of us in America started to really start seeing dancehall culture, and then seeing where reggae music was going in regards to how dancehall was starting to becoming a lot more slack, the slackness. Shabba talks about on track number 2 that, it didn't start or exist just then, but it really was, I think, more so a culture shock. The fact that the music was talking, it was explicit when it came to talking about sex and gun talk and bad man ting and stuff like that. So you really start to see that start to come in. So you're seeing another side of reggae to what our parents saw. And as reading a lot of the articles about this album, it sort of tells me that, they were speaking to a reality that was different than necessarily what our parents' generation grew up with. But a lot of good times listening to this, and especially hearing it through the systems and hearing it, my vehicles though, especially down here, was more, we had people and Pathfinders and, Trailblazers and things like that. You know what I'm saying? Like Tahoes, Tahoes with the big subwoofers in the back. So yeah, I definitely understand that. So just so we can go into the album, as far as your highlights, y'all talked about a couple of the tracks, man, but whoever wants to go, starting with the highlights.
Yeah. I really think for me, there's not a lot of highlights for this album. Personally, it's like 3 tracks, maybe 4 or 5 that could really, get played like that. But it's Trailer Load of Girls, which I already touched on. The House Call featuring Maxi Priest. That song still gets played till today.
Yeah.
And then it's The Jam featuring KRS-One. Those would be my highlights. Looking on the notes here, I see that Stephanie Mills was on that song as well somehow.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that The Jam, the original lyric for that is another Shabba Ranks song, which I guess was a previous song. That's an even more hardcore tune.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think this whole thing, I feel like it's more of, Agard is more of your vibe. You know what I'm saying? What do you say?
Yeah, well, so, you know, the standout songs are obviously the same songs that you mentioned, Trail a Load of Girls, House Call, The Jam. However, this is an album where I feel like a lot of the songs are what they like kind of album cuts in a sense, you know, where it's a little bit of social commentary, you know, like you said, where does the slackness come from, where Shabba's kind of defending himself in like, you know, the court of public opinion, so to speak, as to like, yo, it's always been here, but, you know, he's speaking to a time where artists are dropping, you know, the euphemisms and double entendres and really starting to talk raw and real, which was happening in the sound system culture by that time. However, you know, it may not have made it to a lot of recordings. You know, even the Woman Tangle track, you know, seriously, this is a weird take, you know, listening so many years later, but it's kind of like a feminism type tune, you know. Because it's talking about, you know, fellas treating their women a certain way, and if they don't treat them a certain way, you know, it's like the slackness, but then it's still the respect. You know, stuff like Gone Up. You know, they're talking about the economy of I don't know what they call it in Jamaica, you know, what is it, Backstreet. You know, but so for me, a lot of these tracks are not necessarily, you know, things that I'll play out as a DJ, but they're tracks that I'll listen to, and it's kind of like a snapshot of the moment, you know, that moment in time.
Indeed. I think I got a similar feel listening to this past week. It's probably been the first time that I listened to it, like from track 1 through track 12 in quite a long time. I sort of have the similar feeling to you all. Obviously, my highlights are, of course, Trailer Load of Girls. And to me, what I remember about that is the track itself. It's an incredible track, but then it's, you know, the video as well, really what I remember too, because that was the first time I saw like a dancehall artist have a video like on the box, you know, where we used to see most of our music videos back in the day. We would sit and watch it all day long. House Call with Maxi Priest is a track that has become, I think for me, surprisingly, such a big hit even 30 years after it's come out. In retrospect and in hindsight, looking at it, obviously it had great crossover appeal. You guys interviewed Maxi Priest last year on Reggae Lovers. Him being from the United Kingdom, Shabba being from Jamaica and being a dancehall artist. But that song has had incredible staying power over these last 30 years. And still, like you said, Kahlil, still gets played a lot now when you're out. But other tracks for me, obviously being a hip-hop fan, I love The Jam featuring KRS-One. KRS-One's been, at that point, a hip-hop veteran, really starting to come into the 90s. Really, I guess, at that point, starting to find the new identity for himself as well. An interesting thing, along with Stephanie Mills being on here, is another artist that helped to produce this track alongside KRS-One was Mad Lion. So, you know, lots of collaboration on that track there as well. Some of the other tracks, though, I did find very interesting, as you mentioned, Agard, what you said also about with Women Tangle and then also with Gone Up. But a hilarious one to me as well is Thesaurus. You know, it's just the subject matter. Is that you know, just the subject matter, you know what I'm saying? And so that by listening to it,
my eyebrows raised when I heard that one again too. I was like, what?
Like, you know, take your private out your fist, your nastiness. It's just like, it's just funny though, man. Like you said, a lot of like album cuts on here though. Not really anything that, you know, we were used to being able to see when you see standout reggae albums. You know, see like at least the ones that we've seen more recently in these last 20, 25 years or so, at least probably a good 3 to 4, maybe even 5 singles that would come out as a result of that. And with here, you just didn't really have a whole lot of album singles. It would be, like you said, tracks that you would play as the album sort of playing along. But if you're a DJ or something that you're seeking out and you're like, yeah, I'm going to go to this track right here because this is what's going to set it off, you know? So a little surprised by that and being as though that I didn't listen to this that recently until leading up to this week. But interesting content nonetheless. I do think like some of the subject matter he touched on it with this, and it's a wide variety of them. And in particular, coming out of Triddle Load of Girls and listening to where does the slackness come from. I thought it was interesting though, because he was like, everybody makes it think as though slackness is coming from me, but it's not. You know, like I didn't invent slackness; it didn't come from me. You know, this is real and this is raw, which is also similar to something he said in a lot of interviews leading up. I read something in the Chicago Tribune in '93. I did an interview with him, and he said, "Listen, dancehall is a reflection of what our youth and their reality is right now in Jamaica, in the United States, in Canada, in England, wherever. That's what the reality is." So those are my highlights. Not necessarily anything as far as any lowlights per se, but I just don't know if I would necessarily take any of these tracks really and the majority of them and like seek them out to play them like in a mix or something. But let me ask you all this in regards to more so the impact of this album and what it did to dancehall in the U.S. What do you all think? What is your take on the impact that it had in regards to helping to be able to break down the door, and what happened like shortly afterwards? Like this is the early '90s, and like what? Just give me your take on that.
Well, I think first of all, the production on this album, the production value, and some of the choices they made. Like, you know, I know we talk about the Maxi Priest, you know, house call, but a lot of the production was of the times, and it was a little bit ahead of the times in a sense, you know, in terms of dancehall. And I'm just talking about the instrumentation and how it's mixed. So I think that added to the value of, you know, the dancehall genre itself. It, you know, because, I mean, before this and since, like you said, a lot of albums that come out from artists are songs that have been tested already in the dancehall community, and it's kind of like a compilation, so they know that they're big songs. Whereas this, you know, some of his lyrics may have been, you know, said before. However, the production is new at the time. And I think that did a lot for, you know, seeing how dancehall can cross over, especially with, you know, this early 90s sound. You know, at this time, what you have like groups like In Vogue and, you know, those types of groups, and like how a song like House Call can be played, you know, in that segment with like an In Vogue or a Soul to Soul, you know, which is a, you know, a British group that, you know, was also crossing over of, you know, Caribbean heritage. So you know, I think the impact for me was on the production, the quality of the production, and, you know, the way that the sound carried across. You know, that to me, as well as Shabba's deep voice, is why it's so appealing, I feel like, to a broader audience.
Yeah. Kahlil?
Yeah. I mean, this album, it is a very kind of special work, because looking at it from like a American standpoint, it kind of feels like a hip hop project, even though it's authentically Jamaican dancehall music. I think you're getting like, you know, lyricism, you're getting different thesis statements from the artist, different essays that he's penned, you know what I'm saying, with talking about different things on each individual track. So there's a certain uniqueness, like there's a juxtaposition of different styles. Trailer Loader Girls, dancehall, you know, House Call is more soul, R&B, lovers rock. And then you have the jam on there. And I'm just calling those out because those are the three that we mentioned already that we think are the big singles. Yeah. This album did break into the U.S. charts, was a #1 R&B album of 1991. So it was on the top R&B and hip hop albums Billboard chart, hit #1. That was the peak position. And 89 on the Billboard top 200. So in terms of the year-end charts, it finished, you know, in the 52nd and 63rd positions in 91 and 92 on the R&B hip hop albums chart. So that just kind of tells me that you don't necessarily need 4, 5, 6 singles on an album. You know what I'm saying?
Of course.
Like, I think people think about the fact that, you know, you have to have like this album full of smash hits. And it's like, no, you know, maybe you just need one song that's going to get radio airplay and then and have a good video. And, you know what I'm saying, that might be enough.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this actually translates to nowadays, but I think there's things that you can learn from this.
Yeah, that's how it was back then. Back then, you just had 2-3 singles, and the rest was just for the audience's enjoyment. Really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not definitely. I think that production style of reggae, and we talked about this in this article, how ever since '85 when we first heard the sling tang rhythm, and after that it was like dancehall going to these using a lot of digital sampling and using electronic percussion and drum machines and things like that, really kind of laid the framework. And to me, it's a little outdated, I guess, for today concern, but to me simplicity was better, because when you listen to a lot of those tracks, I really get that feeling of unique and authentic dancehall. You know what I'm saying? While people may have looked at that sampling back then, who were making music in the 60s and 70s with full bands and everything else, and saying that was somehow bastardizing the genre, then you then get those who were sort of using that and building the foundations of what dancehall was in the 80s and the 90s to what dancehall is nowadays, and how it's very shiny, very, it's the electronic production has moved to quite yet another level where, the music even sounds so much better. Like now, it's like you don't even get rhythms anymore. I mean, the rhythms have almost, like, not going to say non-existence, but they're definitely not as prominent as they were during this time when this album came out. I think it was big. I mean, partially because, one, Shabba had a presence on the mic as a DJ, you know what I'm saying? His lyrics were great. The music was sort of hypnotic to a certain extent, I guess you could say. And it was something that people sort of, I guess, grabbed onto. And when you have a DJ that has a presence on the mic, he's probably, I would say, one of the few of his time, of his era, that could command a presence like that on the mic, with his voice and his, presence, what I'm saying, the lyrics and everything, really sort of taking everything into one. He's probably about a handful of those who would have that type of presence back then.
Yeah. Yeah, Shabba is the type of artist, he doesn't have to really say anything of substance, actually,
Right.
because of the voice. But I mean, he does, for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And reading this, they were sort of talking about, they were saying, like, in this article, this is Chicago Tribune, which we'll have in the show notes, they talk about that reggae's new attitude, and they talked about pretty much how you go from the times of Marley and Peter Tosh and Bunny Wailer, and going from that to going into dancehall culture, and how different it was in regards to dealing with the different era of reggae fans and people who loved reggae music, and how it went from reggae sort of being this thing that, that hip white people like to call as something that they said that they were fans of, to where it become really something that became a big urban phenomenon, to where now it's crossed over to the point where it's worldwide now. It's in every, livable continent that you can think about. There's a reggae culture that exists somewhere. So yeah, man, I think that's the bigger thing, I think, for me with this album, is the legacy more so than anything else. In regards to track list, both of y'all would have to say, would you say that Trailer Load is your favorite song of this, or is it another one?
Yeah, I would say Trailer Load, man.
Yeah.
I actually lean towards House Call a little bit more. For nostalgia purposes, Trailer Load definitely, that is a snapshot in time for me.
Yeah.
But, musically, sonically, I like House Call.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I'd listen to House Call now, or play it more so than Trailer Load, but
yeah,
I still think that Trailer Load is like, like I was saying, it stands out as being one song that represents the era like really well.
Yeah,
quintessential dancehall, basically. Yeah,
yeah. And as a selector, Kahlil, that's a song that you go to maybe if you're trying to warm up. Like
the Trailer Load.
Yeah.
Trailer Load for me it would be like, I'll reserve it for commercial settings more so.
Got it. Okay.
You know what I mean? Because as far as Shabba goes, he has a lot more songs that would connect better with
the dancehall artists,
with a hardcore dancehall.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. True, man. Cool. Well, so now we're going to get to the final test, as we always do, to tell us what you think about it. You think this is a certified classic, a borderline classic, a classic just for its time, or not a classic at all? So I'll take either one of y'all. What do y'all think? And then, of course, we also do a rating, so about how strongly you feel about it. Is it a 7 out of 10? 7, you don't feel as strongly on your rating, or 10, you feel absolutely strong about it?
Does it stand the test of time? For me, I think it does. I think it does because, it's not like I listen back to this album and there's anything that I would say stands out as being a miss. People might have criticisms about the lyrical content or some of the topics. However, when it comes to the presence of Shabba, the production, how it was engineered and mixed down to like some of the rhythms, like I really think it does stand the test of time, and I think it is, for me, an appropriate representation of, I guess, a little bit more commercially what was representative of dancehall at that time.
Got it. Okay. And Kahlil, what about you?
Yeah, this period is not my favorite period at all. In terms of this music, I'd have to say that as my kind of caveat to this, but I'd still say considering that the album still does stand the test of time. The way that it's arranged, it has hits you right off the top with the big hit, and then you go through some other singles that really paint a more complete picture of the artist, and then it sprinkles in the next hit collab, and then kind of goes on in that way. So I think it's classic enough to say it does stand the test of time, even though it's not my favorite period. And I say that because I'm just not pulling out a lot of dancehall and reggae from 1990 and 91 and 92. Generally, I prefer the mid to late 90s.
Yeah.
And then I prefer, the mid 80s. That's just me.
Yeah. Nah, I understand that. It could be times that we all definitely appreciate more. I think I'm more on the wavelength that you all. I'm more of mid to late 90s into the early 2000s, but, only to, maybe, 02 or 03. And then after that point, I think it gets the scene gets kind of cloudy for me, you know what I'm saying? So, in terms of me, I do think this is a classic in its time. I think production-wise, sonically, it's pleasing to listen to. I think Shabba, as I said, has a presence, and that presence really sort of establishes him as a dominant figure on records. And he really kind of laid the foundation for that for a lot of people. I think it was easy for why a lot of American people, I think, sort of grabbed onto Shabba as sort of their first reggae superstar that they really were drawn to. Speaking to a lot of my friends who are American, and telling them they're asking me about the pod, and I'm telling them, I'm about to do Shabba's album. And, they, of course, first thing when they go to Shabba isn't even anything on this. It's Ting-a-ling-a-ling and Mr. Loverman, obviously, you know what I'm saying? So, but they always tell me, everybody I talk to says, my American friend said that he was the first dancehall artist they really got into. So, but I do say it's a classic in its time. As you all say, when you go through Shabba's catalog, there are songs and maybe even projects that you probably point to more than this album as well. But I do think legacy plays a part into this, and I think that the impact plays a part into it as well. So this album, the first dancehall album to win Best Reggae Album at the Grammys as well. And he did it 2 years in a row. He did it with this and then also did it with Extra Naked the following year at the Grammys. So I think the impact and the legacy does play a part in it. So, but I will say, at least classic in its time. Not really anything that you feel that you would skip or any lowlights per se, but I do think the Shabba has better material out there throughout his catalog. So there we have it. Shabba Ranks, as raw as ever, 30 years ago this year. Make sure you go listen to it. It's a relatively easy and short listen. It's really a car ride if you're heading somewhere about 45 minutes away that you can listen to, and I think you'd be pleased at least listening to it. So make sure y'all definitely go check it out. And obviously, want to thank my guest here, Kahlil, and also Agard of the Reggae Lover podcast. Just want to give you all a chance to sort of shout out the podcast, let us know what you all have coming up, and let the people know where they can find the pod on social media, and then what else you guys have going on in regards to websites or anything else.
Yeah, man, give thanks, yo. Really appreciate you inviting us to come do this, you know what I'm saying, and chop it up about the big man, the Shabba, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
everybody listening, please visit reggaelover.com, and there you can find all of our links. Reggae Lover Podcast is available everywhere podcasts are available. Just wrapped up season 7 of the show, and we'll be forwarding back with a new season very soon. So coming soon, bigger and better things, and including video on the YouTube channel. So make sure you check that out. And yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
And then,
man.
yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for having us on. This is my first time on the show, even though Kahlil's been here a few times. So I really, really do appreciate it. And I'm gonna give a little Shabba commercial right now, okay? So I know we just did, this album, but my favorite Shabba, I know you didn't ask this, but my favorite Shabba album packed with a bunch of hits for me is a year prior, Just Reality. So anybody who is not familiar with Shabba, who wants to really, really feel this era, go to Just Reality. It was released in 1990, and that to me is even more reminiscent of this time period. You know?
Yeah, definitely. I think
that's my favorite one too.
Actually. I think those of us who are Shabba fans, that might be most of our favorites. That signature track on there, of course, is Dembo, which it's the legacy for that song Dembo is long just even just beyond just that album. That pretty much the rhythm that came from that is the foundation of what you got now know as reggaeton. So. Definitely. Big ups to that for Agard. So Kahlil, Agard, let us know where they can find Reggae Lover Pod on social media, and then where y'all are on social media too as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, man. It's so Kahlil knows this better. Shout out the social medias, Kahlil.
Sure. On Facebook, there's a growing page with lots of content. It's at Reggae Lover Podcast. On Instagram, it's at Reggae Lover Podcast. On Twitter, it's at Reggae Lover Pod. And, of course, as I mentioned, reggaelover.com. You can find all the links there to listen to the show or link to your favorite podcast apps. Search us on Google, leave a rating, leave a review. Hit us up, Reggae Lover Podcast at gmail.com. And Brian, thanks again. Appreciate you having us on, man.
Yeah, man. Big up. Big up. Yes, I appreciate having y'all on here. And just so that you all know, in regards to the type of quality you're getting on Reggae Lover Podcast, you get a lot of great interviews. I mean, some of the interviews they've done just over the past year or so with Steve Urchin Williams, with Maccabee. They've had also an interview as well. Like I said, they did an interview with Maxi Priest sometime last year. Also an interview, I believe, as well. Y'all did one with Spraga too as well, right? That's not too long ago.
No, we didn't actually interview Spraga on that platform. Though we have on prior works, but we did a full album review of Spraga's latest album. So that was the Spraga feature.
Yeah, indeed. And
we've had guests like Lila Ike. We have guests on from different, from the UK and from Africa, and people doing reggae in different parts of the world. We have just discussion topics covering, peeling back the layers of the onion. So if you're into the reggae and dancehall culture, we talk the things and we invite guests and listeners to submit the feedback and topics they'd like to hear us talk about, questions they'd like to hear us answer on the air, and things of that nature as well. So
yeah, indeed. Yeah, make sure that y'all definitely go check that out. And of course, this month that we're running into is Caribbean American Heritage Month, June. So big up to all the people that are part of the Caribbean community across the nation and across the world. Make sure y'all definitely check us out. And big up as well to the Caribbean Podcast Directory. Big up to Carrie Ann Reed Brown as well. And all the folks doing great things at Breadfoot Media. So make sure y'all go check all that out. So Kahlil, Agard, thanks again, man. We'll link up soon. I know we got Bone Tequila's My Experience coming up, and also Maestro coming up later on this year. So we'll definitely chop it up whenever y'all are ready.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Just send the link.
Yes, sir.
Put the bat symbol in the air.
Yes, sir. And there you have it. Big shout out once again to Kahlil and Agard of the Reggae Lover Podcast. Make sure y'all checking them out on all the platforms, of course, as well, where you can get podcasts, and follow the website links and check them out as well on social media. Make sure you go follow them and listen up, man. They're going to have a new season coming up real soon, and check their back catalog. Definitely pleased to have those guys and can't wait to have them back once again. And that is going to wrap up yet another edition of The Vault. Please make sure you are checking us out on our new host on Red Circle. You can also download, stream, and subscribe to The Vault Classic Music Reviews on any one of our streaming sources. If you go to the link in any one of our social media pages to our bio, in there you'll find our link tree with all of our social media sites and also all of our streaming sources. Again, you can get to The Vault Classic Music Reviews on Instagram on @VaultCMR Podcast, on Twitter @Vault Classic, and on Facebook and YouTube you can search The Vault Classic Music Reviews Podcast. Go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube page, like the Facebook page as well. Check us out on social media. Shout us out. Let us know what you think. We do it here all for you. We appreciate the support, and if you have a friend, tell a friend, and make sure that that friend tells a friend. And always remember to keep your headphones on and your music loud, but not too loud. And as we close, we'd like to remind everyone to dream big, because dreams are the basis for creation. Always create, motivate, and elevate, because you were never destined or created to stay stationary in this life. And on that note, we say peace.
Thank you for listening and coming into The Vault. Please subscribe and follow us on Facebook at IV Creative and Instagram at IVECRE8.